Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Crypto Byte. Today is Friday, March 4th. Happy Friday. Congratulations on making it through another week. And this was a particularly volatile and uncertain week here. Even in the last 24 hours, lots of news driving this market. We'll dive into that. Bitcoin, the 42K level has been breached. So CJ, I'm sure we have plenty to talk about from a technical perspective, and also some news headlines that broke over the last 24 hours that, are kind of acting as a catalyst for some price action. We'll hit all that and a little bit more before we get started. CJ, how you doing today, my friend?
Doing well, Monty. Thanks. Might as well just hit it off with some of those news items. Obviously the major catalyst last night being the attack on largest nuclear power plant across Europe. Russians have taken that one, but that was responsible for a lot of volatility last night, or at least price action corresponded with that particular news event. But also much larger implications is in Infura and MetaMask, and the censorship around sanctions. And do you want to go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, let's start with that because that did break last night and it was very significant. And, to your point, CJ, this market really seems to be coming to a head on the back of this war between, Russia and Ukraine, and in more ways than just kind of the price action. Also in terms of, regulational perspective, sanctions are being laid down, and that's affecting the crypto market in some major ways. So let's quickly talk about that. First and foremost, this headline broke last night. If you were on Twitter, on crypto Twitter, you probably have heard about this by now. But crypto industry sanctions on full display as MetaMask's Venezuela hiccup. So last night, Venezuela MetaMask users noticed that they did not have access to their account. They no longer were able to access MetaMask, and that was coming on the back of a result of sanctions that were applied too broadly. This basically how it works is there's a company called Infura, and they are more or less the API for Ethereum. So, Ethereum is the blockchain, and a company like MetaMask is more or less the front end that allows you access to the blockchain. And Infura provides, API services to a lot more than just MetaMask. And they are a US-based company. They have investments from US institutions like JP Morgan. So they are subject to US laws and regulations. And as a result, they closely monitor changes to US sanctions programs made by the Office of Foreign Assets Control. We saw some changes just last night, and they narrowly tailor their internal controls to comply with the law. Currently, those regions that are restricted include Iran, North Korea, Cuba, Syria, Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk regions of Ukraine. Obviously this conflict between Russia and Ukraine has sort of escalated the, speed at which these sanctions are being laid down. And this has resulted in some kind of, over protection. And that resulted in Venezuelan users losing access to their MetaMask account. And this was not the only news of this flavor that we got last night. Also, OpenSea bars Iranian users as U.S. sanctions talk ramps up. And obviously that's on the back of this conflict, like I keep saying. But last night, OpenSea users were, very surprised to find that they were not able to access their OpenSea accounts. OpenSea is the largest NFT platform in the world. It's a NFT marketplace, and it's Ethereum based as well. So, this is also on the back of those sanctions that affected Venezuelan users. And we had a tweet from Infura, that Ethereum API. And they said, in response to the concerns we've been hearing, we want everyone to know that we corrected the problem that so many of you have pointed out in changing some configurations as a result of the new sanction directives from the US or from the United States and other jurisdictions. We mistakenly configured the settings more broadly than they needed to be. This was our oversight, and we are grateful that it was pointed out to us. Once we determined what happened, we were able to fix the problem, and the service has been restored. But obviously, this has raised some inherent issues, right? We're talking about what are supposed to be decentralized and uncensorable financial services, but they're clearly on censorable, direct rails. So this has led to a lot of uncertainty, but also it's kind of acted as a catalyst for some price action on other layer one protocols, as Ethereum is starting to shift away from its sort of utility use case and act more as kind of a store of value, almost like Bitcoin. We've seen that reflected in a lack of speculation into some of Ethereum-based DeFi assets. Also, just a lack of traction on Ethereum-based dexes like Uniswap and SushiSwap, and that has benefited, and I think could potentially benefit more other layer one chains like Phantom or Luna. CJ, you pointed out to me that Anchor protocol, their token up big this morning and continuing to climb. I think we could potentially be seeing that as a result of what I just talked about there. So some big concerns. This is all coming to a head on the back of this war between Russia and Ukraine. But ultimately, it is concerning stuff. One last thing I will say is that I do think there's a little bit of a fundamental misunderstanding here about, exactly what these implications mean. If you did lose access to your MetaMask account tomorrow, that wouldn't necessarily mean your funds are gone. They are still being logged on the blockchain. Like I said, MetaMask is more or less just a front end API. So as long as you still have your seed phrase, you could recover your funds via another wallet. So, MetaMask is kind of just the front end that's being cut off. It is still concerning, but, the inherent decentralization of the Ethereum blockchain is still alive and, more or less uncensorable. So, lots of interesting news over the last 24 hours led to some interesting price action as well. But we would definitely be remiss not to start with those headlines. But I will pass it back to you, CJ.
Yeah, Anchor has been quite interesting. I mean, start of the month, it was around $1.30. Today it's trading over $5. And not really, the main purpose of that token had namely just been rewards, not necessarily like a long-term store of value. Regardless, let's go to Bitcoin and let's discuss some critical levels. So earlier in the week, we talked about potentially, would we long at that level? And I said, no, I'd rather wait for kind of a retrace, some place to find some support because we are coming up against some critical resistance there at 45K. Last night, we really experienced that, sell-off, obviously, but now we're down and we're testing critical levels. Before, below 30,000, below 40,000, I think Bitcoin becomes a little bit more bearish. I would not want to lose that level, but if we begin to bounce from this level, I would look to potentially bullish scenarios. I know it's difficult, obviously, with such uncertainty, but we are touching a lot of critical levels that have a potential to provide support. You see that I have the 20 smooth moving average highlighted. Same thing with the Bollinger Band coming with that 20 smooth moving average. Williams Alligators, TWAP, Keltner channels, it's all hitting down at that roughly 20 smooth moving average to 20 simple moving average. The exponential EMAs are getting hit as well as support. So this is ultimately a very strong test at 40K for Bitcoin, very critical level here to hold for the bulls. And, I'll be looking to buy off this level if we start to see a little bit of a reversal on a higher time frame. So let's go and discuss that potential setup. So we are coming across a pretty strong resistance level or support either way. So you just want to look for a deviation, right? You want to look for a failure at this level. And we're not seeing it yet, unfortunately. I mean, the overwhelming nature of bearish price action on equity markets and European markets. I mean, just look at the DAX, the German index. It is really suffering, down over 3% today again. So that's obviously just creating a very risk-off environment, difficult for things like BTC and ARK to rally. But overall, you want to look for some type of a deviation where you break below that critical support level, but bulls are willing to step in on this level and actually buy it and potentially push it back up. So if we can find some type of rounding pattern where we get back above really the level we're at right now, kind of where we're at 41, if we can get some strong price action from that level, I would look for potential longs. I would look for a deviation kind of construction similar to this, where you get down, you test it multiple times. Each time is kind of weaker, and then ultimately it's kind of a failure swing at the end. Very similar to how 45K really held as well. You just see multiple tests of this level, and price never really wants to break it. Ideally, you'd want to see something from the inverse perspective if we are going to truly put in a higher low here. And if we don't and drop below, these previous levels of roughly 37, then I would not really be looking at that many bullish situations. But obviously, we'll have to reevaluate if price action becomes, down to that level. But overall, that's the setup right now. That's what we're looking at for Bitcoin. And before we move on, I guess we should. Oh, yeah. I mean, are there any assets you'd like to hit as well, Monty? Before we move on.
One last one I would mention would just be Ethereum. So let me just quickly pull up that chart because we have been just kind of highlighting that sort of downward sloping trend line that we've been seeing emerging basically since the top. And once again, we were rejected at that level just a few days ago. And where Bitcoin has that 40K level directly below as support that you were talking about, CJ. ETH doesn't really have all that much support until down at the 2,500 level. So that's still a little bit off here from a percentage basis, and we could see a bit more of a harsh correction from that perspective. But as long as we can maintain this upward sloping trend line, continue to see more bullish supply absorption from presumably long-term holders and whale accumulation at these lows, that makes me bullish. And I just want to get a breakout above this downward sloping trend line and ultimately get a break above 3K. I think like I keep saying, this market does seem to be coming to a head here. We're kind of closing in, seeing this compressing formation here where, kind of less buyers are stepping in, but it's being sold into a little bit less each time. So I think ETH is just, worth a look at these levels, but I think it is a bit more susceptible than Bitcoin for perhaps a correction to about 2,500. So that's just something to keep in mind here. I think all of the alts in general, if Bitcoin does break below that 40K level, could be in for a little bit of interim pain. That being said, I will be looking to accumulate once we do kind of head to retest some of those critical levels, plenty of which I'm sure we'll be talking about in the members only dojo of the day right after this. But that's all I got, CJ. Anything else you want to add before we wrap things up?
Yeah, like you say, all alts will go down, other than Luna, of course. But yeah, just crazy how resilient that asset has been. But yeah, one last chart I'll hit is just ETH BTC. Kind of goes along with what you were just saying there, Monty. And one thing that's interesting is that if Bitcoin is to rally here, it primarily will likely be a Bitcoin-led rally, just based on a lot of the posture in some of the market caps. Like if you look at Total 2, being the altcoin market cap excluding Bitcoin, we never really created higher highs. We also created lower lows, which was far different from what Bitcoin has created in the sense of higher highs and higher lows. Also, if you look at the DeFi perp on FTX, you're still in this downward channel of lower lows and lower highs. So we'll see if Bitcoin has the strength to bring some of those assets up with it. But as of now, we're still creating bearish engulfing candles and waiting for a tentative bounce on higher time frame settings. But with that being said, really appreciate all you guys for joining us today and watching. Please hit the like and subscribe. That helps the channel quite a bit. But hope you have a great day in the world wherever you're at.